I am Carisha Lewis, Assistant Director of Student Alumni Engagement, and I welcome and thank you for joining us for today's Imagine 2022 Day Session with Kathleen Dickinson, Class of 2016. And today's session is sponsored by the President's Office, Career Services, and the Oswego Alumni Association. So before we get started, I just want to give a few housekeeping rules. Tonight's workshop is being recorded, and you will be able to view it on the Imagine 2022 website shortly. You are welcome to use the chat or Q&A feature throughout tonight's event if you have any questions. If you haven't already, please check out the events on the Imagine 2022 website so you don't miss out on any of the amazing sessions. A link will be placed in the chat shortly. And without further delay, I'm excited to introduce tonight's speaker. Kathleen Dickinson attended SUNY Oswego from 2013 to 2016 as she was completing her master's degree in school psychology. While pursuing her degree, she served as a graduate resident mentor in the Hart Hall Global Living and Learning Center. After graduation, Kathleen moved to St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands, where she worked as a school psychiatrist for 4 years. In 2020, Kathleen moved from the Virgin Islands to North Carolina, where she currently serves as one of two school psychologists in a rural school district of about 9,000 students. So without further ado, I present Kathleen.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share my presentation and I'll get started. Okay, so like I was introduced, my name is Kathleen Dickinson. I'm currently working as a school psychologist. I will say it's not school psychiatrist. A psychiatrist is actually something a little bit different than a school psychologist. So if you guys noted that typo, it's just a little bit different. So tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about myself, but I'm also going to be presenting some information from the National Association of School Psychologists. Right now, school psychology is a field that's facing a lot of shortages. So the School Psychologists National Association is doing a push to try to get information out there to undergraduate students to just explain what we do and to try to recruit people that might be interested in the field. Okay, so in general, school psychology, what we're trying to do is really improve the lives and the learning of children and youth in school districts and in different settings. Let's see. Okay, so when you're thinking about school psychology and you're thinking about what type of career you're interested in, some of the questions that you might ask yourself, are you interested in helping create effective schools? Are you interested in making a positive difference in somebody's life? Are you interested in assisting families and teachers? Are you interested in working with children and youth? Are you interested in contributing to supportive communities? And then when you're thinking about looking for a job specifically, are you interested in a job that has a lot of job openings, a job that offers diverse roles and responsibilities, something that has a good salary and good benefits, and also a job that has flexibility and stability? Okay, so if you answered yes to any of those questions, school psychology might be a good career for you. So all of those things really directly relate to the practice of school psychology. Those are some of the goals that we work towards. And right now, the career field of school psychology is a very good career to get into. There's a lot of job openings. There's a lot of stability because we're in such high demand right now. Okay. So a little bit about my story. So I became a school psychologist because a lot of the questions that I asked first slide, I answered yes to. I love working with children, and I think children are a very important part of the world's future. So I think it's important to help children so that we can ensure that the world is moving in a positive direction. And really the kids are the thing that I love the most about being a school psychologist. I love interacting with children of all ages, from preschool students all the way up to, young adults that are 21. Because in the school setting, we serve children all the way up through. Right now, the most challenging aspect of being a school psychologist is, as I mentioned, the shortage of staff. Because there is such a shortage of staff, our caseloads right now are very high, which makes it difficult to provide some of the support that we typically would provide in a school setting. Okay, let's see. So who are school psychologists and what do school psychologists do? So school psychologists are highly qualified professionals that have a graduate degree. So I'll talk about, I think, a little bit more about this a little bit later, but I went and got my bachelor's, and then I went back for a school psychology master's degree, which was a 3-year program that was 69 credits at SUNY Oswego. So I took classes full-time for 2 years, and then in my 3rd year, I did a 40-hour a week internship, as well as classes on top of that. School psychologists can work typically we work in school settings, but there can be some other settings such as like hospitals and private therapy companies. What we do, we provide comprehensive psychological and educational services to a diverse range of students. We work on promoting children's learning, positive behavior, and development in general. And we also support students' social, emotional, and mental health. So a little bit more about what we do. So in order to support the things that I just talked about, we conduct assessments, we do counseling. We also provide some other mental health and academic services in the school, such as interventions and that sort of stuff. We work with children individually, but we also can work with children in groups. So sometimes we'll do social skills groups with multiple different children. We also do a lot of collaboration with parents. So reaching out and making sure that the parents are involved in their child's education. Consulting with teachers. So when teachers need assistance or if they have any questions, we help them out. We also work a lot with administrators as well. So principals and other related therapists. So in general, we help schools, families, and communities provide successful outcomes for children. Okay, a little bit more talking about that. So we have to help all of the students. So a lot of times school psychologists focus specifically with special education, but really school psychologists are there to provide help for any student in the school that might need help, whether they're receiving special education services or not. And that includes the parents and the teachers, as I mentioned. Some of the things that we can help them with, if a child is having a difficult time with learning, so if they're having a difficult time with learning how to read, with math or with writing, that also can include behavior and attention issues. So some students might have a difficult time in school because they have difficulties with behaviors, they're acting out, or they have a hard time paying attention in class. Some students have problems with peers, so they have a hard time maybe making friends, or they're isolated, they might experience bullying. We do help with those sort of situations. And then some students who might be dealing with depression or other mental health issues. We don't provide ongoing therapy like might be provided in outside settings, but we do assist students with dealing with those in the school setting. Okay. One of the other parts that's a difficult part of the job is coping with crisis and trauma. So if there's ever a natural disaster, or if there's any school violence or anything like that happening, we're there to help the schools to cope with those. So we, can meet with students if they're having a hard time dealing with any of those things, and we coordinate with other staff members in the school to make sure that we have a plan in place to respond to those issues. Some of the other things that we can help support, students that are dealing with poverty, violence at home, homelessness, foster youth, children that are dealing with loss and grief. A lot of times, these sort of things that are happening in a child's home can affect them in the school setting. So we like to make sure that we're addressing that and trying to help them work through those things, and also connecting families to community resources so that they can try to alleviate some of these issues. And alongside that, so any sort of family issues, kids dealing with divorce, death in the family, a parent that has substance abuse issues, or if they have a parent that's deployed in the military. Again, those things can affect students, and they might need help with that in order to access their education. Okay. So as I mentioned, most school psychologists do work in the public K-12 schools. A lot of what we do as a school psychologist is related to special education and special education funding. However, that's not the only place that we can work. So this is just kind of a little bit of graphic that shows the percentages of where school psychologists work. So like I said, 86% of the school psychologists that are employed as of 2015 were employed in public schools, but we can also work in colleges and universities, private schools, private practice as well, and then faith-based schools. There's a small percentage that work with the Department of Education, and then in clinics and hospitals.
Kathleen, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So, for the last slide that you had, do you know why there is such a big jump from public schools all the way down to colleges and universities? What may cause more people to lean that way?
Yep, it actually, I think, probably has to do with funding and with legislation. So one of the big pieces of legislation that funds specifically special education and school psychologists is what's called IDEA. And that requires that the services that are provided by school psychologists are available in the public school sector. Okay, so we might be able to provide services in these other settings, but it's not necessarily required. So for example, at the college and university level, some students, what we would support is, if students need accommodations on testing, like extra time, or like note takers for class and that sort of stuff. But it's not as big of a need as the public school. A lot of times, once you get to the college and university level, the students themselves are expected to more advocate for themselves as opposed to having somebody like a school psychologist there. And I think too, if you think about the fact that we're school psychologists, we are specifically trained to deal with psychological well-being in the school setting. So we deal with education and we deal with educationally relevant topics. Some of the other private settings we might be able to support, but there's other types of psychology and types of psychologists or psychiatrists that would be working in those settings.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so looking at who actually are our school psychologists, there is a pretty big gap in terms of gender. So back in 2015, they determined that 83% of the school psychologists that were practicing identified as being female, and only 16% identified as being male. And I think we probably find that not only in school psychology, but also in other areas like school counseling and social work as well. And then looking at racial and ethnic characteristics, again, we do have a lack of diversity, and it's something that we are trying to improve upon. Because like I said, we deal with a lot of different types of students in the schools, and it is good to have that diversity that can deal with different issues that might arise. So again, from that 2015 study, 87% of the school psychologists that were practicing were white. Very small percentage, 5% were Black or African American, only 2.8% were Asian, and 6% were Hispanic. Okay, so the next graph just shows the United States demographics and racial and ethnic characteristics. So you see, going from the last slide, the US has more diversity than what we're actually seeing in practice. Okay, and then looking at linguistic diversity. So that is another area that we're trying to improve upon right now. Well, I guess this was from 2015, but 86% of the school psychologists that were practicing were English only speaking. So for me, I mean, English is my primary language. I know some Spanish and some other languages. However, I'm not a bilingual school psychologist. I cannot practice in another language. So like you see, there's only 7% of the school psychologists are actually bilingual in Spanish. Very, very small percentage are bilingual in American Sign Language, and then a small percentage can speak any number of other languages. So that can pose a challenge when we have students in schools who are either bilingual or mostly only speak a different language and are not quite speaking English fluently yet. When it comes to working with them, providing support, completing evaluations, it does become a challenge when we don't have the diversity of school psychologists speaking those other languages. We can use translators and interpreters, but that's not as effective as having somebody that actually speaks the language. Okay, so then just again, this next graph just looks at the United States demographics. So there is a large population in the United States of people that do speak Spanish, and we do have people that speak Chinese, French, German, Tagalong, and a bunch of other languages. So there really is a need for school psychologists that can speak these other languages and be able to support children in not only English, but in their native language. Okay, so really all of that was to say that we're really pushing for, we really want school psychologists, people to come into the field that are of different backgrounds than the school psychologists that we currently have practicing. So they're looking for specifically males, anybody that's from a non-white background, anybody that's bilingual. Of course, we're happy to have anybody, but we're trying to get the word out there so that more people will join the field and become interested and aware of who school psychologists are and what we do. Okay, so the next part that I'm going to talk about, this is a graph that shows the median salary by region. Now, you'll see where it says SD, that's what's called a standard deviation. So plus or minus that amount in each area. So the salary range can vary a lot by area, and it does change depending on if you're working through a staffing company or if you're working directly through a school district. But the job market is pretty good. It's decent pay. And especially, I mean, that's practicing as a master's level school psychologist, but you can go back and get your PhD in school psychology, and that would change the salary range a little bit. Okay, so how to become a school psychologist. So I mentioned a little bit for me, so obviously graduate from high school, and I think everybody that I'm talking to right now would be attending college in their bachelor's programs. And then preparing for graduate school. So if you're thinking about graduate school, it's a good idea, especially, now we're in January, school be coming to an end in the next few months, really thinking about what sort of areas you're interested in and trying to get some experiences that go alongside, that will make you good marketing to get into a graduate program. Okay, and then once you get accepted into a program, obviously you have the graduate school coursework that you have to complete in order to become a school psychologist. Okay, so this goes a little bit more into detail. The best undergraduate experiences that will help you in graduate school for a school psychologist would be a bachelor's degree majoring in either psychology, child development, sociology, education, or a related field. That's not the only areas that can go into a graduate program in school psychology, but those are some really great backgrounds that will help you in pursuing a degree in school psychology. If you come from a background that isn't necessarily in one of those areas, but you're still interested in school psychology, a big thing is looking to get volunteer or work experience that does give you opportunities to work with children and youth. So for example, working at a summer camp, volunteering at a school, working at a YMCA, or engaging in some sort of mentoring program. Okay, so I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier, but for graduate school, a specialist degree, which is like a master's level degree, it's typically over 60 graduate semester hours. At SUNY Oswego, as I mentioned, my program was 69 credits. So that was a master's program with a certificate of advanced study. It did take me 3 years full time, including a 1-year internship in the 3rd year. And once you have your degree, there is a certification that you have to get after that, and each state has its own licensure and certification process, but you're able to start work directly out of graduate school. And as we mentioned, this allows for work in typically the public schools. If you want to work in one of those other settings that I discussed, you can work in some other settings, but oftentimes a doctoral degree is required, especially for like private practice, if you're looking at getting into something like that. So the doctoral degree is a little bit of a longer program. So the doctoral degree is typically over 90 graduate semester hours. They typically take 5 to 6 years or more, depending. And it also includes a 1-year internship, and it allows for work in schools, but then it also expands. You can actually go back and work in academia. So if you want to ever teach school as a professor or engage in any research, the doctoral degree will help you get into those areas. And also, as I mentioned, it provides options for independent practice. So if you're interested in maybe starting your own practice, then you would want to consider getting your PhD. I will say, so I've been in practice for about 5.5 years now with my master's degree, but I am at this point looking at getting my PhD. I've applied to programs and I'm hoping to pursue my PhD for the next school semester, because I'm ready to move out of the public school sector and go into more either academic or research or more administrative positions. Okay, so what sort of coursework do you go through? So the coursework for the school psychology graduate program develops knowledge and skills in prevention and intervention students for services for students and families. So one of the big things, especially right now, because there's such a shortage, assessment is a very big piece of what school psychologists do, and it's a big part of the training program. So assessment includes cognitive assessments, academic assessments, behavioral assessment, emotional assessment, and all those different things. You also learn about academic learning and interventions. So actually, when I was in school, I was able to work with students and implement reading interventions to help them improve their reading skills. You also learn about mental and behavioral health interventions, a little bit about instructional support and special education services. You also learn about crisis preparedness, response and recovery, family, school, community collaboration, also can be referred to as consultation, and then cultural competence. Okay, also we look at data collection and analysis. So for students, we really want to look at not only testing information, but we try to collect information about the students as they're in their classes, if they're getting interventions, trying to see how they're doing, how they're improving, and being able to analyze any of the information that we collect. We also look at resilience and risk factors for different types of psychological issues or learning disabilities, that sort of thing. As I mentioned, consultation and collaboration. So that can be with parents, with teachers, and then also related services. So speech pathologists, occupational therapists, physical therapists. In the school setting, there's a lot of working together to try to meet students' needs. You also learn a little bit about research and program evaluation. So part of that research is, I took a stats class. You learn how to formulate research to answer a question. And then professional ethics, so making sure that everything that you do is ethical, and a little bit of the education law. Okay, so getting a job. So once you get through graduate school, like I said, once your 3+ years are done, you also have to, before you actually finish your program, there is a praxis exam that you have to take. I don't remember a lot about the praxis exam. I feel like I took it and I forgot about it afterwards, but it's kind of similar to, I guess, similar to an SAT or a graduate record exam. And it basically just looks at general information that you have knowledge, and you learn the knowledge that you need to have to be a practicing school psychologist. Okay. So once you graduate, in order to get a job, you do have to have a current and valid state credential for practice. So the good thing about the SUNY Oswego program is that they are accredited by the National Association of School Psychologists. So it is relatively easy. Once you finish the program and you've done a good job in the program, it's very easy to get credentialed in New York State. And the good thing is, because it is nationally accredited, it's pretty easy to get, I wouldn't say easy, it's possible to get credentialed in other states as well. So like I said, well, in the introduction, I worked in the Virgin Islands for 4 years, and I'm currently practicing in North Carolina. So I was able to work in New York, in the Virgin Islands, and in North Carolina from my graduate training. Okay. There is a link at the bottom. I'm not sure if anybody's interested in seeing that. I could share the presentation at the end, but that gives information state by state for the different credentialing requirements. It is state by state, can be a little bit tricky. When I moved to North Carolina, it was a little bit confusing to try to figure out what was required. And there are a couple of different licensing procedures that you have to follow. And then, as I mentioned, independent practice, if you're working outside of the schools, there is a different process behind that, and you might actually have to have an additional credential or further education in order to get qualified for independent practice. Okay, so job outlook. I've mentioned this a couple of times during the presentation so far, but there's a very high demand for school psychologists right There's a very big shortage of school psychologists. So if you are in the field and you're certified and you're ready to work, it's pretty easy to find a job. And as I mentioned before, federal education law includes provisions for school psychologist services. So it is actually mandated that we are actually in the schools and providing the services that we are trained for. As I mentioned before as well, we do have a need for professionals from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds. I guess school psychologist has been listed in the top 10 among best social services jobs in the US News Report. And as we talked about, the school psychologists are certified by state boards of education. Okay, so in general, I mean, it is a great career choice. You can positively impact the lives of youth, help parents and educators. It's pretty flexible school schedule. So that's actually one of the things that I really like about being a school psychologist in the public school sector is that you get holidays and you get summer breaks. I can work over the summer breaks if I want to, but I have that flexibility that I don't need to. And you really have a range of responsibilities. So there's never typically a boring day. You have different stuff that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. And there are a variety of work settings. So like I said, typically you work in a public school setting, but it varies. I have worked in my 5.5 years as a school psychologist, I typically work with an entire school district. So I'm serving schools across the entire district. So on a given day, I might be at a few different schools. Some people do work directly at one school, so they might work at a high school or a middle school, and the type of work that you do, depending on which setting you're in, changes a little bit. Okay, I think I got through that a little bit quickly. It's only 5:30 right now, but we can open up to any questions, or if you have anything you'd like me to talk about more, I'm happy to share.
Thank you, Kathleen. So yeah, there are a few questions. So the first question is your bachelor's degree. What was that? And I don't think you said what it was in.
No, I didn't. So my bachelor's degree was I had a major in psychology and I minored in philosophy. Okay, which is not necessarily related, but it was just something interesting to me that I did. So it was a related field.
Yeah, I was just about to say, do you think it still kind of influenced it, even though it wasn't within the school sector, but that kind of brought your interest in?
Yeah, for sure. Yep, and it was a good background to get me prepped for it, because psychology in general, very related field.
Okay, thank you. So my other question is, how is it dealing with students, especially now with, the pandemic and everything, COVID and all of that? I know it affected a lot of people mentally. And I just wanted to know kind of how did that affect your work? Were there any new things that you guys had to try, especially with us being virtual and not even being able to be face-to-face with a lot of your patients? How did that work for you guys?
It's definitely been a challenge. So I will say, actually, what I do, I've been in person for quite a while. I did work remotely for a couple of months, but starting, I think 2020 school year, I was in person 90% of the time, providing certain services. So really right now, my job is focused on testing, and all of the testing that I do is one-on-one. So specifically with that, some of the challenges were, how did we do that one-on-one work and keep us safe and the children safe from, spreading COVID? So that was a little bit of a learning curve. Obviously, we had to work with masks on. For a while, there was a plastic barrier between the student and myself. That was challenging in a variety of ways, just for the sole fact that it was hard to communicate, sometimes talking loudly and making sure that they heard me and that I could hear them. And also just the logistics of getting materials from one side to the other and that sort of thing. On the mental health side, unfortunately, I wasn't able to provide as much counseling services in the schools as I would like to, but it was definitely and still is needed. A lot of the students that I had come in for testing sessions, sometimes we'd have to take, 10-15 minutes just to chat beforehand, because at that point, especially last year, they
Right.
hadn't been around other people. They'd been in their
Mhm.
homes with family. They hadn't really had a conversation with anybody outside of their home in a long time. So sometimes it was just, having those conversations, even if it was just about something mundane, anything that they wanted to talk about. And sometimes it was some serious things. They talked about anxiety that they felt related to COVID, or depression that they felt because they couldn't, be around their friends. So
Yeah.
that has definitely been a challenge. And I think right now, still ongoing, there's a lot of challenges related to COVID. And I think just being there to support the students, and, when they need somebody to talk to and just have, a shoulder to lean on, that's helpful.
Yeah, definitely. So I wanted to talk a bit about just some of the things that you brought up within the presentation. So I saw that you were speaking about some places having certain skills, or you were speaking about courses and undergrad and just kind of the things that students should get into. Do you feel like there were any programs or anything that you did specifically at Oswego that you definitely feel like if a student is interested within this, they should try to get into at Oswego?
I'm not sure, because I didn't go to Oswego for my undergraduate degree. I actually went to a different college. So I actually had already decided school psychology was what I wanted to do by the time I actually got there. But I would recommend, if you're not specifically in a psychology program, take a psychology course. You can take an intro to psychology course, or something related to children, child development, just to kind of see if it's something that you're interested in. And then if it's something that you want to pursue further, because like I said, you don't necessarily have to have a specific psychology or development background to get into a graduate program, but you should sort of have an idea of what's involved, and if you're actually interested in it before you look at a graduate program. I think it's good, feel free, we can share my email. I'm happy to talk to anybody if they have further questions. Like I said, we really need people, and people that are interested in education and care about children. So I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, definitely share this PowerPoint with me. I'll definitely make sure it's a reference that we place with on the web as well for students to check out. And you're also an Ask Mentor. So if you are
Yeah.
looking for a mentor within the school psychology realm, Kathleen is one of our great Ask Mentors. So definitely check her out. Another question I had was, as far as you, first of all, you were in St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands, living your best life. That's wonderful. Can you kind of just talk about how the difference in some of maybe even the practices? I'm assuming it kind of is different, being in a different country and on the island and everything, with those students in comparison to how we do things over here. So could you talk about some of maybe those differences that you saw, even those similarities, and kind of what students can expect if they do take that route of going out?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about the Virgin Islands. I miss it, honestly. The weather right now, I live in North Carolina, but it is cold here.
Oh, trust me, Oswego.
Oh yeah, you guys are colder up there. I forgot you guys are in New York. When I moved to the Virgin Islands, that was actually my first year in practice. I started in a different place right off the bat. I mean, I had done internships, so that definitely prepared me, but this was the first time that I was actually out on my own doing work in the field. In a lot of ways, it was similar to what we did, in New York, what I was trained to do. I think the biggest differences were cultural differences. So the Caribbean is a very different culture. I had to get used to the dialect. They talk different than I do. I love the dialect, and I've gotten used to it, and I kind of miss that, but it was difficult on the sole fact that I sometimes couldn't understand what people were saying to me. And also in the other aspect, I'm an outsider coming in, so I was somebody from the States that was coming into this outside culture. So I kind of had to navigate how to gain respect and from, the local people in the schools and the parents, and, interacting with the children. And it was difficult. So I mentioned crisis response. A year after moving to St. Thomas, we actually ended up getting hit by 2 Category 5 hurricanes. So we were pretty devastated after that. It was a pretty major natural disaster. So the schools were actually closed for 2 months. So navigating that in my second year of practice was a very, very big learning curve.
Mhm.
Trying to deal with, students had been through a pretty traumatic experience, families had been through pretty traumatic experiences, and schools were closed. So we know now, how with COVID, school closures can make things very challenging for students. They're missing education, and missing even just basic interactions, socializing with peers and stuff like that. So that was an interesting experience, because not only was I dealing with that in a professional realm, I also was dealing with my own personal stressors related to living through a
Mhm.
natural disaster.
Right.
And that's something, in upstate New York, we might have to deal with snow and rain and, cold weather, but hurricanes were not something that we ever dealt with up there. So that was a huge difference for me. And just in terms of staffing, so there are shortages nationally right now, but living on an island, it is a little bit more difficult to get people down there that will stay. So there was just a high turnaround of people. I was there for 4 years, and I couldn't even give you a guesstimate of how many staff members came in and out from the States, which is not only challenging for you as a staff member, but also for the children who are trying to, get help. It's the high turnaround makes it challenging for them, because as soon as they get used to somebody, they leave, and then they have to get used to somebody new.
Yeah, definitely. I could tell that probably is hard for the students, or they're probably kind of used to it a little bit. They probably have some type of system kind of going on where they kind of just expect it at this point, maybe.
Yeah, I will say, before we move on, now that I'm thinking about it, the cool thing about this job field is that you really can travel to a lot of different places. I know somebody that works in Hawaii. So obviously that's part of the United States, but it is a very different destination. It's a more tropical destination. Actually, last year I had spoken to somebody who was in Germany. So there was actually a job out of Berlin that would be working with the international schools. And that would provide the opportunity. I could have traveled to like Paris to do evaluations, and basically any place that an international school was located. So not every country has exactly what a school psychologist is, but a lot of places have general careers that are in the realm of school psychology. So if you're interested in travel, it is a cool way to get to travel and still do, the job that you love.
Yeah, it's great that you went on to that point. My next question was, what are some good places that students can look or kind of apply to get some of these international positions?
I'm trying to think. So I think it all has to do with just networking. So for me, I think I'm trying to think that the Germany position I found out actually through social media. So I'm part of a Facebook group that's School Psychologists, and somebody had just posted in the Facebook group about it. But you can also, so the slide that's up right now, the National Association for School Psychologists, or NASP, that's a really good place to look for further information. They also have a career, I think, board where they post openings that can be really all over the world. If you literally just Google school psychologists, you probably could Google those positions anywhere. But like I said, really networking, as any other job, once you have a network of people that it's easy to kind of hear about positions in different places. And I will say, once staffing companies have your information, like on Indeed or on LinkedIn, they will contact you. So pretty frequently I get contacted from different staffing companies that are looking to try to fill positions, and traveling positions, a lot of times in places that are very rural or places that are really, really low staffed, they pay a lot of money. Not that money is the only thing, but if that's something that's interesting to you, it's nice to be able to have a job that you can do what you love and also feel like you're getting compensated appropriately. And it's fun too. If you want to do traveling, you can do a different travel position every year if you wanted to.
Right. Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much. Are there any other questions? Girl. I don't think there's any other questions. So thank you so much, Kathleen. We really do appreciate you taking time out of your day and spending time with your alma mater and helping us out. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, this is not my presentation, like I said, but I think the National Association wants the students, if they can, to do the little, what do you call that?
The QR code scan.
I'm showing my age. Yeah. That's
with
just,
their
it's
camera. It's okay.
It's just a questionnaire, just a few questions. Just they're kind of trying to keep track of how many people we're sharing this information with. Also, if you're interested in getting more information, I think there's a little button that you click to say that you are interested, and somebody might contact you just to give you some more information. So anybody that's on, if they could fill that out, it probably only takes a few minutes, would be very helpful.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kathleen.
Yeah, of course.
Really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for that engaging and powerful presentation. I think the main takeaway I'm definitely getting from this is definitely to check out that website, guys. Make sure you check out the website. Definitely scan this QR code and go ahead and do the questionnaire and get more information. And please apply to the Ask program. Kathleen is one of our great Ask mentors, and she can definitely help you out. So definitely apply. Thank you all for participating today. We'd love to for you to complete our post-session survey, which you can find on our website, the Imagine 2022 website. Please note we are asking participants to complete this form every time they attend an Imagine 2022 session. Each successful submission will count as one entry to this week's prizes. The more events you attend and submit the survey for, the more chances you have to win. And don't forget to check out all the exciting programs that was held all throughout this month for Imagine 2022. You can check it out on our website, which I will place in this chat shortly. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Kathleen, for coming today and spending time with us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Have a good one, everyone.